The night sky was calm, painted with silver stars until the first explosion shook the earth. No one on the small human colony had expected war to come so suddenly. The alarm screamed across the settlement as ships tore through the clouds, black silhouettes against the moonlight. The people ran in fear, unsure if these were raiders, pirates, or something far worse. Among the chaos was a young man named Daniel. He was not a soldier, not a leader, just an ordinary worker who repaired machinery. But that night, fate pushed him into something greater. He rushed toward the storage bunkers, thinking only of survival, until he heard it. A cry, sharp and terrified, echoing from the ruins of a broken wall. Through the smoke, Daniel saw her. A small alien girl, no older than a child, was trapped under pieces of shattered stone. Her skin glowed faintly under the firelight, shimmering in shades of silver and pale blue. Her eyes were wide with fear, not of him, but of the soldiers in the distance. The attackers were not after the colony alone. They were hunting her. Daniel's heart pounded. Every instinct told him to run, to leave her there, and save himself. But something about her desperate gaze held him frozen. Without thinking, he leapt forward, pushing away the heavy debris with trembling hands. The girl gasped in pain as he lifted her free, her small frame light in his arms. Another blast thundered behind them. Daniel turned, shielding her as flames lit the night. The soldiers were advancing, tall, armored figures with glowing helmets. He had never seen aliens like them before. Their weapons pulsed with blue fire, tearing apart anything in their path. Daniel didn't know why they wanted her, and he didn't care. He sprinted toward the dark forest at the edge of the colony, clutching the alien girl tightly against his chest. She buried her face against him, whispering words he could not understand. Her voice was soft and musical, but laced with fear. Branches whipped at his face as he ran deeper into the forest. Behind him, the attackers spread out, searching. He stumbled over roots, his lungs burning, yet he did not stop. The girl clung to him, and for reasons he couldn't explain, he felt a strange need to protect her at any cost. Finally, after what felt like hours, Daniel collapsed near a riverbank, his chest heaving. The girl sat beside him, her bright eyes, watching him with a strange mixture of fear and trust. She touched her chest, then pointed at him, whispering a single word. He could not understand her language, but somehow he knew. She was thanking him. That night, as the war raged on in the distance, Daniel realized his life had changed forever. He was no longer just a worker. He had rescued someone who didn't belong on this world, someone being hunted. He didn't know who she was, or why the soldiers wanted her, but he knew one thing with certainty. They would come for her again, and when they did, he would have to choose: stay the ordinary man he had always been, or fight for the alien girl who had placed her life in his hands. The morning sun broke through the forest canopy, painting golden streaks across the river where Daniel and the alien girl had taken shelter. The chaos of the night felt far away, but the smoke rising from the colony reminded him it was not over. He had saved her for the moment, but he had no plan for what came next. The girl sat quietly on a rock, her silver blue skin catching the light like crystal. Her eyes followed him carefully, as if studying every move he made. She looked fragile, yet there was a quiet strength in her gaze, something that made him wonder who she truly was. Daniel tried speaking, pointing at himself. "Daniel," he said slowly. He tapped his chest again. "Daniel." The girl tilted, her head, then touched her own chest. A soft, melodic sound escaped her lips, almost like a song. He couldn't understand it, but he nodded anyway, repeating her name as best as he could. She smiled faintly, the fear in her eyes softening. That small moment of trust gave him hope. But hope was fragile. In the distance, the sound of engines growled through the trees. Daniel's stomach tightened. The hunters were searching. He crouched low, motioning for her to stay quiet. She obeyed instantly, pressing close to him, her small hands trembling. 3 armored soldiers moved through the woods, their strange weapons glowing with faint blue light. Their helmets scanned the ground, humming with energy. Daniel could see them through the trees, methodical and precise like predators hunting prey. He pressed a finger to his lips, urging the girl not to make a sound. She nodded, her wide eyes never leaving his. For a moment it seemed they might pass by, but then one of them turned, raising his weapon. Daniel's breath caught. Had they been seen? The soldier paused, visor glowing faintly, scanning the air. The girl's hand clutched Daniel's arm, her nails digging into his skin. He held his breath, praying the sound of the river would mask their presence. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the soldier turned away, following his squad deeper into the forest. Only when the last echo of their steps faded did Daniel exhale. His body shook with relief, but also with fear. This was no accident. These beings would not stop. They wanted her for a reason. That night, as the stars returned, Daniel built a small fire by the river. The girl sat close, her tail, long and soft like a fox's, curled around her legs. She spoke again in her alien tongue, pointing at the sky, then at herself, then at him. Her words were a mystery, but her intent was clear. She was trying to explain something. Daniel listened, trying to piece together meaning from her gestures. When she pointed at the rising smoke in the distance, her face turned sad. When she pointed back at herself, her expression hardened with fear. Whoever she was, whatever she carried with her, it was dangerous enough to bring war to his colony. Daniel stared into the fire, his thoughts racing. He had wanted only to survive the night, but now he understood there was no turning back. Protecting her meant standing against enemies far beyond anything he had known. The girl reached out suddenly, touching his hand. Her skin was warm, glowing faintly in the firelight. She said his name, clear, soft, and certain. Daniel looked up into her eyes, and in that moment, something changed. She no longer saw him as just a stranger who had carried her away from danger. She saw him as her protector, and he realized he could not abandon her. The war was only beginning, and both of their lives were now bound together by a choice he could not undo. The days that followed were heavy with tension. Daniel and the alien girl stayed hidden deep within the forest, moving carefully and never lingering in one place too long. The girl was quick to learn, watching how Daniel scouted for safe paths, how he listened for danger in the rustling of leaves or the distant hum of alien ships. Though she couldn't speak his language, her intelligence was clear. She mimicked his actions, pointed out safe routes, and even helped gather edible roots and berries. She was no ordinary child, he realized. Her eyes held wisdom beyond her small frame, and her instincts were sharp, as though she had lived through danger before. Still, Daniel's mind never rested. Every time the engines roared overhead, his chest tightened. The hunters hadn't stopped. They were sweeping wider, burning through forest clearings, leaving trails of smoke that stained the horizon. They wanted her alive. That much was certain. And if they found her, nothing would protect his world from the destruction they would bring. One evening, as the last light faded, Daniel and the girl sheltered in the hollow of an ancient tree. The firelight flickered across her glowing skin, her silver blue shimmer dimming as she grew tired. Daniel found himself wondering what kind of life she had left behind. Was she royalty, a fugitive, or just a child caught in a battle far bigger than herself? She surprised him then by reaching into the small satchel she always kept close. From it, she drew a small crystal, glowing faintly with an inner light. She placed it in Daniel's hand, her eyes searching his face, urging him to understand. The crystal pulsed softly as if alive, warm against his skin. Daniel frowned, holding it carefully. "What is this?" he whispered. Of course, she couldn't answer, but her expression told him enough. This was why they were chasing her. Suddenly, the air trembled with the sound of ships descending nearby. Daniel shoved the crystal back into her satchel and doused the fire. "We need to move," he whispered urgently. She nodded, her small hands clutching his sleeve tightly as they slipped into the darkness. They ran until the forest opened into a cliffside overlooking the colony. Below, Daniel froze at the sight. His home was unrecognizable, Buildings smoldered, ships hovered like predators, and soldiers patrolled in the thousands. The war had not ended with one night. It had only grown worse. The girl tugged his arm, pointing, away from the destruction toward the horizon. Beyond the mountains, a faint glow lit the night sky, like a beacon. She spoke her alien words again, this time more forceful, more urgent. Daniel didn't understand the language, but he understood her intent. That glow was safety. That glow was where they needed to go. Before he could reply, voices echoed from behind. Daniel turned sharply. 3 armored hunters were climbing the ridge. Their visors glowed like fireflies in the night, their weapons pulsing with deadly light. Daniel's heart thundered. He pulled the girl behind him, scanning for any path of escape. The cliff was steep, the forest behind them blocked, and the hunters were closing fast. For the first time, Daniel felt the weight of hopelessness. He was no soldier, no hero, just one man protecting a child who didn't belong to his world. Yet, as the girl pressed close to him, her eyes shining with trust, he felt something stir within him. Fear did not matter. Failure was not an option. The hunters raised their weapons. Daniel clenched his fists, ready to do anything to protect her, even if it cost him his life. And just as the first blast of blue fire erupted, the crystal in the girl's satchel flared with blinding light. The forest exploded with light as the crystal flared to life. A wave of energy burst outward, shaking the ground beneath Daniel's feet and knocking the hunters back. Their weapons sputtered, their visors flickering as the glow overwhelmed their systems. Daniel shielded his eyes, clutching the girl tightly as the shockwave rippled through the trees. For a moment, the world was pure brilliance, then silence. When the light faded, the 3 hunters lay stunned on the ground, their armor sparking with strange blue cracks. Daniel stared at the crystal still glowing faintly in the girl's satchel. What is this thing?" he whispered. The girl looked at him with wide, serious eyes. She touched the crystal through the fabric, then placed her small hand over his. Though she could not speak his language, the meaning was clear. The crystal was power. It was protection. And it was the reason they would never stop chasing her. The hunters began to stir, groaning under their armor. Daniel knew they didn't have long. He scooped the girl into his arms and ran, forcing his tired legs to move faster than ever before. Every step felt heavier, but the thought of her being taken drove him forward. They descended from the ridge and pushed into the deeper forest. The glow in the sky ahead grew brighter, guiding them like a distant star. The girl pointed toward it repeatedly, her expression firm, almost commanding now. It was no random beacon. It was calling her. By dawn, Daniel collapsed near a stream, his body trembling from exhaustion. The girl sat beside him, her glowing skin dim with fatigue. She reached into her satchel again, this time offering him a small fragment of dried alien fruit. He hesitated, then smiled faintly and ate. It was sweet and strange, and it gave him strength. For the first time, they shared a small laugh together, a sound that felt out of place in a world filled with fire and war, but it gave Daniel hope. That hope, however, was short-lived. The sound of engines roared above, louder this time. Daniel dragged the girl under the cover of trees as a massive alien dropship descended into the valley. Unlike the hunters, this ship was not scouting. It was preparing for something far bigger. Troops poured out, armored giants in lines carrying heavy weapons. They spread through the valley with brutal precision, burning everything in their path. Daniel's heart sank. This wasn't just a search anymore. This was an invasion. They were fortifying the land, turning it into a battlefield. His colony, his people, there was no saving them now. The girl tugged on his sleeve, her eyes fixed on him with determination. She pressed the crystal into his hand, its warmth pulsing with strange life. She shook her head firmly, as if telling him not to. Give it back. She wanted him to carry it. To protect it. Daniel stared at the crystal, its glow seeping into his skin. He felt its energy humming, almost like it recognized him. A chill ran through his body as he realized the truth. The girl hadn't just chosen him by chance. The crystal had chosen him too. Suddenly, branches snapped nearby. Daniel spun around. 2 hunters were advancing through the trees, their armor scorched but functional. Their weapons glowed, charging for another strike. Daniel gritted his teeth, clutching the crystal tightly. He wasn't sure what it could do, but he knew one thing. If he didn't act now, they were both finished. As the hunters raised their weapons, the crystal pulsed violently in his hand. Energy surged through his body, burning hot but controlled, like fire wrapping around his veins. His vision sharpened, his fear melted away, and strength he had never known filled his muscles. The hunters fired. Daniel raised his hand instinctively, and a shield of pure light erupted in front of them, absorbing the blasts. The girl gasped softly, her eyes wide. For the first time, Daniel wasn't just her protector. He was something more, and the hunters realized it too. The blast shield of light faded slowly, leaving the forest floor scorched but quiet. The 2 hunters froze, their glowing visors flickering in confusion. They had fired their most powerful weapons, but the human still stood unharmed. The small, alien girl hidden behind him. Daniel stared at his own trembling hand, still glowing faintly with the crystal's energy. His heart raced, but he felt no pain, only strength, like something ancient had awakened inside him. The girl's wide eyes shone with both awe and relief. She whispered his name again, softer this time, as if recognizing him not just as a protector, but as something greater. The hunters recovered quickly, charging forward with blades that pulsed with blue fire. Daniel's instincts screamed at him to run, yet his body moved differently now. The crystal hummed in his grip, guiding him. As the first blade swung down, Daniel raised his arm and a flash of energy burst outward, throwing the soldier back against a tree. The second lunged, but Daniel's fist connected with its chest, the impact rippling with power. The alien's heavy armor cracked like glass. The forest fell silent again, the hunters lying motionless. Daniel stood over them, chest heaving, barely, believing what he had done. He was no soldier, yet he had fought and won. But deep down, he knew it wasn't really him. It was the crystal. The girl approached him cautiously, her small hands brushing the crystal that still pulsed faintly in his palm. She nodded firmly, her expression calm now, as if this was always what was meant to happen. Daniel shook his head. I can't do this, he muttered. But she only stared at him, unblinking, as though she trusted him more than he trusted himself. That night, they rested in a small cave tucked behind a waterfall. Daniel washed the dirt from his face while the girl sat cross-legged, humming softly in her alien tongue. The sound was haunting but peaceful, and for the first time since the invasion, Daniel felt a strange comfort. He thought about the colony, about the people he had left behind. Were they still alive? Were they prisoners? Guilt gnawed at him, but every time he looked at the girl, he felt the weight of his choice. Protecting her meant abandoning everything else. But maybe, just maybe, protecting her was the only way to stop the war at its root. The next morning, Daniel woke to find her already standing at the mouth of the cave, staring toward the mountains. The glow in the sky beyond the peaks was brighter, now pulsing like a heartbeat. She pointed to it, her eyes sharp and determined. He knew then, they had to reach it. But as they set out, a chilling sound echoed across the forest. Not the hum of ships this time, but something deeper, a horn-like roar that rolled through the air. The girl stiffened, her body trembling. Daniel crouched, gripping the crystal. Through the trees, shadows moved. Not just soldiers this time, but massive creatures. Beasts armored with alien plating, their eyes glowing the same blue light as the hunters' weapons. They moved like trained predators, sniffing the air, following the girl's scent. Daniel's stomach tightened. The enemy had unleashed more than machines and soldiers. They had brought living weapons. The girl grabbed his hand tightly, pulling him toward a narrow path through the cliffs. Daniel ran with her, his pulse hammering, the sound of claws and growls chasing them. The crystal hummed again, ready to respond, but he knew this was different. He could fight soldiers, but these creatures, monstrous, relentless, and faster than him, were something else entirely. They broke into a clearing, the beasts crashing through the trees behind them. Daniel turned, planting his feet, the crystal glowing hot in his grasp. The girl hid behind him, whispering in her alien tongue as though praying. Daniel took a deep breath, raising the crystal as the first beast lunged. And in that moment, he realized the truth. This wasn't just about survival anymore. The crystal had made him part of something far larger than himself. The beast lunged, its armored claws tearing through the soil as it charged straight for Daniel. Its eyes glowed, with a savage blue light, and its mouth opened wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth. Daniel's instincts screamed to run, but the crystal pulsed hot in his hand, urging him to stand. He thrust his palm forward, and a burst of radiant light shot out. The blast struck the creature mid-charge, throwing it back into a tree with bone-shattering force. The ground shook as the beast collapsed, but it wasn't dead. With a furious roar, it pushed itself up, blue fire sparking across its body. Daniel's chest heaved. He had never fought anything like this. Soldiers could be outmaneuvered, machines could be broken, but this beast was pure rage and muscle, designed to kill. The girl clung to his back, whispering desperately in her alien tongue as if begging him not to fall. Two more creatures emerged from the shadows, circling them, their low growls vibrating through the air. Daniel tightened his grip on the crystal. He wasn't just protecting himself anymore. He was protecting her. If he failed, there would be no second chance. The first beast lunged again. Daniel met it head-on, light flaring around his fists. He struck once, twice, each blow echoing like thunder, the crystal's power surging through his body. The creature staggered, but its armor absorbed most of the force. A claw raked across Daniel's shoulder, burning like fire. He stumbled, nearly dropping the crystal. Pain seared him, but he forced himself to stay upright. He wasn't invincible. The crystal gave him strength, but he was still human. The girl suddenly screamed, her voice cutting through the chaos. The beast froze for half a second, their heads snapping toward her. Daniel seized the moment, hurling the crystal's energy outward in a wide arc. The blast struck all three creatures at once, hurling them back into the trees. The forest trembled. With the impact, branches snapping, leaves scattering like ash. Silence followed, broken only by Daniel's ragged breathing. He collapsed to his knees, sweat dripping down his face. The crystal dimmed in his hand, its glow fading as if it too had been drained. The girl rushed to him, her small hands pressing against his wound. Her touch glowed faintly, soothing the pain, though not healing it completely. She looked at him, with fierce determination, shaking her head as if to say he must not give up. Daniel forced a weak smile. "I'm not done yet," he whispered. But inside, doubt gnawed at him. How many more enemies would they throw at them? How long before his strength failed completely? As dawn crept over the horizon, Daniel carried the girl further up the mountain path. The glow ahead was brighter now, pulsing rhythmically like a beacon. It felt alive, calling to her, calling to them both. But when they finally reached the ridge, Daniel stopped cold. Below, nestled in a hidden valley, stood an ancient structure. Towers of stone and crystal reached for the sky, glowing with the same light as the girl's satchel. The architecture was alien yet breathtaking, humming with power. He realized this was no refuge built by humans. It was a sanctuary of her kind. The girl's eyes filled with tears as she gazed at it. She whispered something soft, almost reverent, then pointed down toward the structure. This was where she had been trying to lead him all along. But the moment of peace shattered quickly. From the opposite ridge, ships descended, dark and menacing. Squads of hunters poured out, their weapons gleaming. The beasts had only been the beginning. Now the true army had come. Daniel's grip tightened around the crystal. The girl looked at him, her face pale but resolute. She had led him here for a reason, but reaching the sanctuary would not be easy. The enemy knew where they were, and this time Daniel would not be able to fight them alone. The valley below shimmered with otherworldly light, the alien sanctuary glowing like a heart of crystal. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He had never seen anything so beautiful and so dangerous. The hunters descending from the ridge weren't coming to admire it. They were here to destroy it, or worse, to claim whatever power it held. The girl tugged on his sleeve, her face urgent. She wanted to reach the sanctuary, but the path down was already filling with enemy soldiers. Dozens of armored hunters marched in formation, their weapons gleaming under the pale sun. Daniel's stomach tightened. Even with the crystal, he couldn't fight them all. The girl stepped forward, raising her small hands. Her skin glowed faintly, and she spoke words that trembled with energy. The sanctuary responded. The towers pulsed brighter, sending waves of light across the valley. For the first time, Daniel realized she was connected to this place. It wasn't just a refuge, it was part of her. Suddenly, the ground trembled. Hidden doors in the valley floor slid open, releasing bursts of steam. Out of them rose tall stone, sentinels, their eyes glowing with the same light as the crystal. Ancient guardians, long asleep, now awakening to her call. The hunters faltered, their formation breaking as the sentinels moved forward. Daniel's heart surged with hope. Maybe they had a chance. But then, from the largest ship, a new figure emerged. The commander. Taller than the others, clad in black armor with jagged crimson markings, the commander radiated menace. His weapon was unlike the others, a staff that crackled with dark energy, pulsing as though it fed on life itself. When he raised it, the hunters rallied, their voices booming in unison. The sanctuary lit brighter in defiance, but Daniel could feel the shift in the air. This was no ordinary soldier. This was someone who would not stop until the girl was in his grasp. The girl clutched Daniel's hand tightly, pressing the crystal into his palm once more. Her eyes locked on his, filled with trust and desperation. He nodded, though fear churned inside him. The crystal's warmth surged again, wrapping him in light. He felt stronger, faster, more aware. But was it enough against an army? Before he could act, a piercing sound split the sky. Daniel and the girl looked up as two streaks of light descended rapidly from the clouds. They weren't enemy ships. They were alive. Two figures wrapped in radiant auras of power. The impact shook the valley as they landed, dust and energy exploding outward. When the light cleared, Daniel's eyes widened. Two alien women stood before the hunters, taller, older, and far more radiant than the girl. They carried themselves with regal grace and terrifying strength. Their long hair shimmered in different hues, one crimson like fire, the other silver like the moon. Their eyes glowed with the same brilliance as the crystal, but far more intense. The girl gasped, her face breaking into tears. She cried out, in her alien tongue, calling to them. The two women turned sharply and their expressions softened. Relief and fury burned together in their gaze. Her sisters had come. The hunters hesitated now, their discipline cracking. The commander, however, stepped forward with a twisted grin. He raised his staff, its energy clashing violently with the sanctuary's glow. Daniel's pulse raced. He glanced at the girl, then at her sisters. For the first time, he understood why the enemy was so desperate. This wasn't just about one child. This was about a family tied to something far older and more powerful than the invaders themselves. The girl's sisters moved forward, their voices strong and commanding, their alien language echoing like thunder. The sanctuary answered their call, its towers blazing with light. Daniel gripped the crystal tighter. He was no longer protecting the girl alone. He was standing with something far greater, a family bound to a power that could decide the fate of worlds, and the war for that power was only just beginning. The valley was no longer quiet. Light clashed against darkness as the girl's sisters stepped forward, their power shaking the air itself. Hunters raised their weapons, but hesitation gripped their ranks. The sight of the two radiant women made even hardened soldiers falter. The commander did not hesitate. His crimson-marked armor pulsed with dark energy and his staff hummed like a living thing. He leveled it at the sisters, unleashing a beam of black fire that cut through the air. The crimson-haired sister moved first, With a sweep of her hand, she conjured a shield of flame that collided with the blast, scattering sparks across the valley. The silver-haired sister followed, raising her arm as arcs of lightning streaked from the sanctuary towers, slamming into the hunters and throwing them to the ground. Daniel watched in awe. He had seen power in the crystal, felt its strength flow through him. But this was different. This was raw, elemental fury. These women were warriors, guardians, and their bond to the sanctuary was undeniable. The young girl cried out, her voice sharp with emotion. The sisters turned their heads briefly, their expressions softening at the sight of her. In that moment, Daniel understood. These weren't just warriors. They were family who had crossed fire and war to reclaim their lost sister. But the commander pressed harder. He drove his staff into the ground, sending waves of dark energy across the valley. The earth split, shadows crawling like venom through the cracks. The sentinels faltered, their glowing forms dimming as if drained by his presence. Daniel's heart pounded. He gripped the crystal tighter, feeling its warmth respond. The girl tugged at his arm, her eyes pleading. She wanted him to fight with them, not stand aside. He stepped forward, his chest tight with fear but his body thrumming with power. As the commander raised his staff again, Daniel thrust the crystal into the ground. A barrier of light erupted, blocking the wave of shadows. The impact rattled his bones, but he held his ground. The crimson-haired sister glanced at him, her fierce eyes widening slightly. She spoke to her silver-haired sister quickly in their alien tongue. Whatever they said, their expressions carried surprise, maybe even respect. The hunters regrouped, charging down the valley in disciplined waves. The sisters met them head-on, fire and lightning tearing through their ranks. Daniel joined, the crystal guiding his strikes, every movement faster and stronger than he thought possible. The girl stayed behind him, chanting softly, her voice harmonizing with the sanctuary. Her presence seemed to steady the crystal's power, as though she were fueling it. But the commander never relented. His dark staff struck again and again, clashing with the sisters' power. Every strike shook the ground, every blast left scars of shadow across the valley. Daniel could feel the crystal straining against that darkness, pulsing hotter with each clash. The battle dragged on until the valley floor was littered with broken hunters and shattered stone. Smoke rose in thick plumes, and the sanctuary towers flickered as though weakened. At last, the commander raised his staff high, the energy swirling around him like a storm. His voice boomed, harsh and guttural, shaking the mountains. He was summoning something greater, something Daniel could feel in his bones, a force that could break the sanctuary itself. The sisters braced themselves, their eyes glowing brighter, their power flaring in unison. Daniel felt the girl's small hand grip his tighter than ever before. She whispered his name, and the crystal answered with a blinding pulse. Daniel stepped forward, his body alight with power, standing shoulder to shoulder with the sisters. He was no alien warrior, no chosen heir of the sanctuary. He was just a human. But in that moment, he realized the truth. The crystal had not chosen him by mistake. The valley groaned under the weight of power. Shadows coiled around the commander's staff as he raised it high, and the sky itself darkened. The hunters who remained fell back, forming a ring around him, their visors glowing with fearful obedience. Daniel's chest tightened. He could feel the crystal in his palm humming violently, as if warning him. The sisters stood tall beside him, their hair flowing like fire and silver in the wind, their eyes fixed on the enemy. The girl clung to his side, whispering softly in her alien tongue, her voice trembling but steadying him. Then the earth split. From the ground beneath the commander, a massive figure began to rise. At first, Daniel thought it was another sentinel, but no, this was different. Black stone and twisted metal fused together into a monstrous shape, taller than the sanctuary towers. Its eyes glowed red, and chains of dark energy bound its body. The commander's staff pulsed, controlling it like a puppet. The sisters stiffened, their faces pale with recognition. This wasn't just a weapon. It was something ancient, something that had been buried here long before the sanctuary. The beast, let out a roar that shook the mountains, scattering birds into the dark sky. It slammed its colossal fists into the ground, sending shockwaves that knocked Daniel off his feet. He scrambled up, the crystal blazing in his grip. The crimson-haired sister shouted something to him in her language, her tone sharp. Though he couldn't understand her words, he understood her meaning. They couldn't defeat this thing alone. He had to stand with them. Daniel took his place beside the sisters as the creature advanced. Together, they unleashed their power, the sisters with fire and lightning, Daniel with the crystal's radiant bursts. The attack struck the beast, shaking it, burning its flesh, cracking its armor. But still, it moved, unstoppable, its roar echoing across the valley. The commander laughed, his voice deep and triumphant. He raised his staff again, and the beast surged forward, swatting aside the sisters' flames like smoke. Daniel was hurled back by the force, pain tearing through his body. He landed hard, gasping for air, the crystal flickering weakly in his hand. The girl rushed to him, kneeling at his side. Tears streaked her glowing face as she pressed her small hands against his chest. Her voice rose in a desperate chant, and for the first time Daniel understood her intent. She wasn't just praying, she was giving him strength. The crystal flared, again brighter than before. Daniel felt its warmth surge into him, mending his pain, filling his veins with fire and light. He rose, staggering at first, then standing firm. The girl's chant grew louder, harmonizing with the sanctuary towers which blazed once more. The sisters turned to him, their eyes wide with surprise as his body radiated the same energy they wielded. He was no longer just borrowing the crystal's power. He was part of it. The beast charged again, swinging its massive arm down like a hammer. Daniel raised his hands, and a shield of light rose to meet it. The impact shook the ground, but the shield held. The sisters struck in unison, lightning and flame exploding against the creature's chest. Cracks spread across its armor, glowing with molten light. The commander roared in fury, driving his staff harder into the earth. The beast howled and swung again, its power doubling. The sanctuary towers shook violently, their light flickering as if about to collapse. Daniel's heart pounded. He knew this couldn't last. The beast was too strong, and the commander's control too deep. They couldn't win by power alone. And then he looked at the girl, her small form glowing faintly, her voice rising louder, her eyes locked on him with unwavering trust. The answer wasn't brute strength. It was her. It was all of them, together. Daniel clenched the crystal, his body trembling as he stepped forward to face the beast one last time. The final battle had come. The beast towered above them, its chained body straining against the commander's control. Each step shook the valley, and the sanctuary's towers flickered as if they might collapse under the weight of its power. Daniel stood at the front, the crystal burning hot in his palm. The girl gripped his arm tightly, her voice steady, as she continued her chant, feeding him strength. The sisters moved to his side, their eyes fierce. The crimson-haired warrior's flames burned brighter than ever, while the silver-haired one's lightning arced across the sky. They nodded at Daniel, not as strangers, not even as allies, but as equals. The commander raised his staff, his voice booming like thunder. The beast lunged forward, its massive arms tearing through the ground. Daniel braced himself, the crystal surging through every fiber of his being. He thrust his hand forward, and a wall of radiant light erupted, holding the beast at bay. Sisters attacked in unison, their power slamming into the cracks already splitting the creature's armor. The valley glowed with fire, lightning, and light, the clash echoing like the roar of gods. But the commander's staff pulsed darker, drawing energy from the earth itself. The beast roared, breaking through the shield, its claws slamming dangerously close. Daniel stumbled back, pain ripping through his body as the crystal strained. The girl cried out, stepping in front of him. Her small frame glowed, brighter than before. She pressed her hand to his chest and then to the crystal, her chant rising until it was no longer a whisper but a song. The sanctuary responded, its towers blazing like suns. A shockwave spread through the valley. The crystal in Daniel's hand no longer pulsed alone. It harmonized with the sanctuary and with the sisters. Power flowed between all of them, a bond, forged not by blood but by trust. Daniel rose again, the light around him so bright it lit the entire valley. The sisters joined him, their voices merging with the girl's song. Together they unleashed everything they had. The crimson sister's fire wrapped around the beast's legs, binding it in molten chains. The silver sister's lightning struck, its chest splitting the armor apart. Daniel charged forward, the crystal blazing in his hand like a star. With a cry that shook the air, he drove the energy straight into the beast's heart. The valley exploded with light. The beast roared one final time before its body shattered, fragments of stone and metal dissolving into dust. The commander screamed, in rage, his staff cracking under the strain. The light engulfed him too, tearing away the shadows until his figure disintegrated into nothing. Silence fell. The valley, once torn by war, now shimmered with calm. The sanctuary towers glowed softly, no longer straining but steady, alive. The hunters who remained dropped their weapons and fled, their discipline broken, their commander gone. Daniel collapsed to his knees, the crystal dimming in his hand. The girl rushed to him, wrapping her arms around him tightly. He smiled weakly, exhaustion flooding every muscle, but his heart was steady. He had protected her. He had stood beside her sisters, and together, they had won. The sisters approached, slowly. They knelt beside their younger sibling, their fierce expressions softening into relief. One touched Daniel's shoulder, her eyes meeting his with silent gratitude. The other spoke softly in her language, but even without understanding, Daniel knew the meaning. He had earned their trust. As the sun rose over the valley, the sanctuary shone like a beacon once more. The girl held his hand, her eyes filled with warmth. She had found her family again, but she did not let go of him. Daniel looked at the horizon, his heart heavy with all he had lost, his home, his people, but also filled with something new. He was no longer just a worker. He was part of a story, far greater than himself, a bond that crossed worlds. And though the war had ended here, he knew their journey together was only beginning.